On the subway, a doctor named Henry impresses a woman by showing off his amazing observation skills. Just as he's about to ask her out, another train suddenly appears and crashes into theirs. The accident is terrible. Most passengers are badly injured or dead. Henry gets impaled by a metal rod. As he tries to reach for his fallen pocket watch, he dies. But his story actually began 200 years ago. Back then, Henry was a doctor on a slave ship and already owned that watch. One day, a sick man had a small fever, and Henry believed he only needed rest. But the ship's owners feared it was cholera and wanted to throw the man overboard. Henry tried to protect him, so they shot Henry and threw his body into the sea. Something strange happened that night. He didn't die. Since then, Henry became immortal. Every time he dies, he wakes up naked in a body of water. That's exactly what happens now after the train crash. In a nearby park, people see him and the police arrest him for public nudity. After he's released, Henry goes home. He lives above an old antique shop. There, he writes in his journal, where he records each time he dies. Meanwhile, Detective Joe is called to investigate the subway crash and finds Henry's pocket watch. Police search every train car, but no one survived. All bodies are sent to the medical examiner's office, where Henry works as a pathologist. While examining the train driver, Joe arrives for updates. Using his sharp observation, Henry quickly figures out that Joe is a widow and struggles with drinking. After finishing the autopsy, he discovers the driver was poisoned. Suddenly, the phone rings. A mysterious voice tells Henry he saw him survive the crash, then hangs up. Later, Joe checks security footage and sees Henry boarding the train. The next day, Henry receives an anonymous envelope. Inside is an old photo of him and a woman from 1955. She once believed Henry's immortality had a greater purpose. The envelope also includes a newspaper about the subway crash and a note. Henry realizes the mysterious caller likely caused the crash to prove Henry is immortal. Henry takes a blood sample from the dead driver and brings it home. His adopted son, who knows his secret, injects him with it. Henry dies again and wakes up in the river, but now he knows the poison is aconite. When he returns home, Joe and the police are waiting. They take him in for questioning. Joe shows him the watch, but Henry smoothly changes the subject and tells them about the aconite. He argues he can't be the killer if he's the one revealing the poison, and since they lack evidence, they let him go. Back at the lab, Henry re-examines the body and finds a small bruise from the poison injection, along with a fingerprint. He brings it to the station, and it matches a man named Hans. Joe and Henry visit Hans' home and notice a dead rat outside. Taking it as a clue, Henry searches the yard and finds a greenhouse full of aconite. They also find a lab in the garage with more poison. Suddenly, Hans shows up. Joe tries to arrest him, but he throws poison at her and escapes by car. The aconite burns Joe's hand and tries to enter her bloodstream, so Henry lights it on fire to stop it. Police arrive soon after with more news. Hans' wife died in a subway crash, caused by the same train driver Hans poisoned. This confuses Henry, as it means Hans isn't the caller. Searching the lab, they realize 2 gallons of poison are missing, and they find traces of ethanol. Seeing drawings of Grand Central Station among Hans' notes, Henry concludes he plans to dissolve the poison in water to cause mass death, at the very place where his wife died. They rush to Grand Central. Henry guesses Hans will try to put the poison into the ventilation system from the roof. But Hans spots them first and shoots Joe. Henry runs to stop him but gets shot during the struggle. Still, he manages to tackle Hans, and they both fall off the roof, dying on impact. Later, Joe wakes up in the hospital with Henry at her side. She remembers seeing him fall, but Henry calmly tells her that couldn't be true. Henry learns that Hans took his own life. Just then, he gets another call from the mysterious man, who claims he shares Henry's curse and is searching for a way to end it for both of them. As Henry leaves, he remembers how he met Abigail during a war, and how he rescued baby Abe from a concentration camp. One night, Vicky is crying in a taxi. She tries to call someone, but no one answers. She tells the driver to stop by a bridge, gets out, and seems ready to end her life. Her body is later found at the morgue where Henry works. The police think it's suicide, but Henry notices clues, the fracture and certain marks, that make him believe it was murder. Joe takes the info to her boss Joanna, but she rejects the theory and wants to close the case. Henry, however, refuses to sign a report that goes against the medical evidence. Vicky's parents visit and insist their daughter was happy and wouldn't do this. Seeing them reminds Henry of Abigail and how they raised Abe. That night, Henry goes to the bridge to investigate. He climbs to the edge, finds traces of struggle, shoe prints, and nail marks, as well as a hook. He slips, almost falls, but manages to hold on. Just as he climbs back, a truck hits him and he dies again. The driver gets out, but Henry's body has vanished. The next day, they discover paint from under the bridge and skin under Vicky's nails. Henry also finds a note from the mysterious man on his desk. He somehow knows Henry died again. Abe examines the paper and notices it's very old. With the new evidence, Joe continues the investigation and learns that Vicky had already checked in for a flight to Paris. She and Henry visit one of her professors, James, who gives them an alibi without being asked. That, and a few other clues, make Henry suspect James and Vicky had a romantic affair. Henry steals a pen to run a DNA test, and the skin under Vicky's nails matches James. They visit his wife, who confirms his alibi, but Henry sees signs in the house that show she knows about the affair. Pressed with evidence, she admits James lied. Later, Henry notices James has a skin condition, which explains the scratch. They were being intimate, not fighting. James isn't the killer, but the police arrest him anyway. Meanwhile, Abe investigates the paper and finds out the crest comes from an old hotel in Italy, one that no longer exists. Henry remembers staying there once, when he tried to break up with Abigail because of his immortality. But she didn't let him go. Later, while examining Vicky's body again, Henry finds skin in her mouth. She bit her attacker. Joe interrupts to tell him James has been found dead. The police think it's suicide, but Henry studies the scene and confirms it's another murder. As the police go after James' wife, Henry visits a student whose name he found on James' documents. The student has a bandaged hand, the spot where Vicky bit him. He confesses that he helped with the paper James and Vicky were writing, but they planned to leave his name off it. Angry and hurt, he killed them both. The student pulls a knife and takes Henry hostage. The police see everything on the security cameras. Joe and another officer surround them and shoot the attacker in the shoulder to save Henry. The case is finally solved. Back at home, Henry gets another call from his mysterious stalker. The man says his name is Adam. He knows Henry is 200 years old and claims to be 2000. Later, Henry finishes a full study of all his deaths. He finds that depending on how he dies, it can take longer to come back. Abe gets upset, seeing Henry so focused on ending his curse while Abe is aging and suffering. They argue. That evening, a man named Bill gets his briefcase stolen. He chases down the thief and starts beating him, but suddenly collapses from a heart attack. His body ends up in Henry's morgue. Henry is shocked to find that although Bill was 67, his body was incredibly fit, yet his brain showed signs of heavy damage, like it had aged much faster. Henry finds a strange liquid in his stomach, with no other food or drink, and suspects it's the cause of death. Joe and Henry question Bill's son, who explains that after his wife died, his father completely changed. He forgot his family and became obsessed with physical strength. Bill was found dead in Chinatown, even though he didn't like that area. In his briefcase, they discovered a large amount of cash and a business card from a strange healing clinic. Henry and Joe go to Chinatown and follow a series of clues that lead them to the spot where Bill died. There, they notice a well-dressed woman who seems completely out of place. They follow her to a discreet door marked with the same symbol as on the card. Inside, they find a luxurious clinic called Eterna, run by a man named Dr. Gardner. He explains that Eterna is a supplement designed to make people feel young again. But he refuses to give them a sample without a warrant. Henry notices that Gardner had some unusual plastic surgery, a longer nose and a more feminine jawline, as if he were trying to hide his true face. While pretending to bump into a patient, Henry secretly steals a capsule of Eterna. Meanwhile, Joe asks Gardner for a business card to get his fingerprints. All of this reminds Henry of the early 1900s, when fake cures were sold for diseases like tuberculosis. After running several tests, Henry discovers that Eterna is made with cheap ingredients to save money. Joe also investigates and finds out Gardner isn't a real doctor, uses a fake identity, and used to run a clinic where several people died. They go see Gardner at his home during a pool party. He tells them he doesn't make Eterna, he only sells it. Henry believes him, since he clearly doesn't have the knowledge to create it. While Gardner changes clothes, Henry chats with a patient and notices she's suffering from memory loss. Suddenly, they hear Gardner scream. They run to check and find him dead, stabbed with a scalpel, a precise injury that indicates medical expertise. Later at the morgue, Henry confirms that Gardner's brain was also damaged by Eterna. The formula contains prion, infectious agents from diseased tissue, which means the patients were unknowingly consuming human brain matter. Joe and Henry confront Lucas, a colleague, who admits that 12 bodies have disappeared from the morgue. They check his weekly routine and quickly realize the only person who could access the bodies was the ambulance driver. The police find him with a corpse in his vehicle. During interrogation, the driver swears he's the one making Eterna, but Henry doesn't believe him. He lacks the skills and training. When the police find the clinic's patient list, Henry is shocked to see Abe's name on it. He rushes home in a panic. Abe explains he didn't take Eterna. It seemed suspicious, but he was worried about how Henry would cope without him. He met the chemist who actually created the formula. He gives the police a description, and they find out she's the sister of a morgue worker and Gardner's girlfriend. Later, Abe sees her in the subway and calls Henry to say he's following her. The police rush to the scene. Henry finds her first. She explains she didn't know Eterna was dangerous. Gardner stole the formula from her and threatened to deport her. The cheap ingredients. That was his idea too. She's full of guilt and wants to end her life, but Henry stops her and the case is closed. Not long after, at a fancy museum party, a woman named Gloria insults several guests. As she walks down a hallway, she realizes someone is following her. Moments later, police are inspecting her dead body. Joe is surprised to see Lucas there instead of Henry. The truth is, Henry used to know Gloria, and it hurts him to see her at the morgue. Since Gloria came from one of the city's most powerful families, the media jumps on the story. Lucas accidentally reveals to the press that it was a murder. The news spreads quickly, and the family is furious. Henry takes the blame to protect Lucas and is removed from the case. Still, Joe asks him to keep investigating with her. They visit the museum, a painful place for Henry, who used to go there with Abigail. Following a trail of clues, Henry retraces Gloria's final steps. He concludes that she was pushed down the stairs and tried to crawl afterward. Security footage confirms she wasn't alone. The man seen with her is Lance, who is brought in for questioning. Lance says he wanted Gloria's blessing to marry her granddaughter, but her son Conrad didn't approve. He has Gloria's ring but claims she gave it to him for the proposal. He says she told him to follow his heart, which sounds suspicious. Gloria hadn't been acting like herself lately. Henry thought she might have had a stroke, so he asked Joe to question Lance about her symptoms. But since he was officially off the case, he couldn't check the body to confirm it. He remembered seeing Gloria at a gala at the museum where she had told him to marry Abigail before it was too late. Meanwhile, Joe spoke with Lance's fiancée and discovered that the family was full of conflict. Gloria was known for being cold, and rumors said she planned to cut her son Conrad out of the will. At that moment, Conrad was selling off Gloria's furniture at an auction, and Abe was able to attend because of his antique shop. While there, he sneaked into Gloria's bathroom and took pictures of her medications, but none of them could have caused a stroke. Later at the station, Henry saw Conrad yelling at Reese and noticed his hand shaking, which suggested epilepsy. He asked Conrad what medicine he was taking and found out it was the kind that could be lethal in certain situations. The police interrogated Conrad, and he admitted Gloria had already removed him from her will. That gave him a motive, but the police didn't have enough evidence to hold him. Back at the lab, Lucas confessed that he felt too guilty, so he secretly went to the funeral home and took a sample of Gloria's liver. Henry analyzed it right away and confirmed Gloria had been poisoned by the medicine, but it had happened before the party. The only person with her at that time had been her nurse. Just then, a police officer brought in a newspaper that said the nurse had inherited all of Gloria's fortune. While the police interrogated the nurse, Joe and Henry searched Gloria's room. In the fireplace, they found a burned letter, and they noticed a champagne glass was missing, even though Gloria didn't drink. Henry called the station to ask more questions and realized the food Gloria ate had made the medicine act faster, meaning she had been poisoned after eating. They then checked her car and found the medicine that caused her death. Henry gathered the family and police to explain his findings. Gloria had a terminal illness and had decided to end her life using the medicine. But the food sped up the effect, and she ended up crawling to a painting made by a former lover, the same one who had written the letter they found burned. With the case closed, Jo shared a story about her late husband. In return, Henry admitted the museum made him uncomfortable because that's where he had proposed to his wife, who had also passed away. A few nights later, a well-dressed woman left a hotel and was suddenly attacked in the shadows. The next morning, the police called Henry and Lucas after receiving a box full of blood. Inside was a human heart. After studying it, Henry informed the police it belonged to a woman and had been removed while she was still alive. They reviewed recent missing persons reports. Using his observation skills, Henry ruled out several women and concluded the victim was likely a night worker. The case reminded him of when he had investigated the Jack the Ripper murders. He had been responsible for examining the victims back then. They went to the hotel where the woman worked, and Henry found a blind spot where someone could drag a body unseen. Nearby, they noticed a meat factory, and Henry discovered the victim shared the name of one of Jack the Ripper's historical victims. It seemed they were dealing with a copycat. The police searched the factory and found the woman's body. Henry was shocked by how closely the killer had copied the details of the old crimes. Then Henry got a call from Adam, who claimed to know the victim's identity. But Henry heard sirens on the phone, and outside. Adam was close. He ran out to find him but only saw the phone left behind. Later, Henry showed the phone to Abe, who said it was a burner phone and couldn't be traced. They started wondering, could Adam actually be Jack the Ripper? After all, the real killer was never caught. But this theory was too wild to tell the police. Instead, Henry focused on tracking the murder weapon. A piece of the blade was found in the body, and Henry identified it as a rare surgical knife. Abe reached out to another antique dealer who might have sold it and stole her contact book. The problem was, it was all in Japanese. Meanwhile, Henry took a closer look at the body and found a mistake the killer had made. Instead of cutting the victim's wrist the way it really happened, the killer had copied the version described in old newspapers. That meant the killer wasn't Jack, but someone copying news articles. Jo and Henry went to the library to check who had been reading the old newspapers. The last person had used a name from the Ripper case. Another name on the list had the same handwriting and was still there. The man saw them staring and immediately ran, so Jo chased after him. Henry grabbed his bag, and inside, he found the blade. Henry receives a call from Adam, who is at the crime scene. Adam tells him that an important detail was missed. The killer isn't just copying Jack the Ripper, but several famous murderers. A black dahlia flower is found near the body, and Henry notices the same flower in the suspect's notebook. Jo eventually catches the man and takes him to the station for questioning. He explains that he's a graphic novel author who writes about demons that inspire killers. He says it was all just research. He also mentions that some of his fans are obsessed and have been stalking him, which is why he ran from Jo, thinking she was another dangerous fan. Reading the comments on his website, Henry realizes some fans have murder fantasies, so he suspects one of them might be the real killer using the comics as a guide. The police check the comics and confirm the crime matches their scenes exactly. Soon after, another body is found in a park, killed exactly like in the Black Dahlia case. A piece of nylon is found in the victim's mouth, meaning the next murder might copy the Boston Strangler. A leaf is found near the body, but it doesn't grow in the park, it only grows in Brooklyn. Using the IP address from a suspicious comment, the police locate a fan living in that area. They raid the house and arrest a teenager named Devon. During questioning, Devon stays cold and confident, thinking there isn't enough evidence to charge him. His parents yell at Jo, but she shows them that some shoes found at Devon's house match footprints from the crime scene. Before the parents leave to get a lawyer, Henry tells them he has proof of purchase from an antique shop. Despite Jo's scolding, Henry visits the antique dealer and returns her stolen notebook. He tells her about the investigation and learns that Devon didn't buy the blade, his father did. After leaving the store, Devon's dad attacks Henry and stabs him in the lung. The man then returns to the store and tries to strangle the antique dealer. Even injured, Henry fights back. Both men fall down the stairs, and Henry is shocked as the attacker steps on his back. The man goes upstairs but is stopped by Jo, who shoots him when he tries to pull out a gun. In the basement, Adam finds Henry, badly hurt. To keep their secret hidden, Adam kills Henry by slashing his throat to make the body disappear. The next day, Jo closes the case, struggling with the fact she had to kill someone. Later, Henry receives another call from Adam, who says it's only a matter of time before Henry becomes a killer too. Some time later, a British nobleman named Colin Cavendish is preparing to marry an American woman named Emily. But he feels uneasy about how much Emily's father, Norman, is spending on the wedding. The next day, Colin's body is found in Central Park. Joe finds it strange that a nobleman would be walking alone at night and that he was murdered without being robbed. Henry notices the wounds don't make much sense and remembers there's no real Viscount Cavendish, confirmed by the British Embassy. This means the man was an imposter. At the lab, they discover Colin is naturally blonde but dyed his hair. This reminds Henry of when he used to paint fake gray hairs on his head to look older until neighbors found out and he had to move. On the body, Henry finds small gold flakes in a neck wound and gravel in other injuries. The shape of the man's mouth also suggests he's American. The very detailed stitching on his clothes points to a specific tailor, so Joe and Henry visit the tailor. The tailor has no clues because Colin paid in cash, but confirms he ordered a wedding suit. The pair then go to the wedding registry office. While Joe talks to an employee, Henry spots a bike messenger with leg scars matching Colin's. The man says the scars come from cycling all day and recognizes Colin from a photo. Colin's real name was Dwight, and he was a bike messenger who disappeared a year ago. Joe's research reveals Dwight grew up an orphan in Oklahoma, moved through many foster homes, then came to New York and worked as a messenger but never had enough money to be with a woman like Emily, who is wealthy thanks to her father. When Emily comes to the police station, officers have to tell her the truth about her fiancé's real identity. Back at the lab, Lucas finds a torn-up check in Dwight's pocket and pieces it together. Henry and Joe visit Norman, who is walking with a slight limp, blaming it on a golf injury. During the conversation, Norman accidentally reveals that Dwight is from Oklahoma, a detail the police hadn't shared. Henry finds a piece of fabric on the wall, which matches Dwight's suit, proving they fought. Also, Norman's golf club matches one of Dwight's injuries. Norman is taken to the station, where his lawyer hands over a written statement. Norman admits hitting Dwight with a golf club at home but denies stabbing him later in the park. Dwight supposedly confessed everything to Norman and planned to tell Emily too, hoping to run away with her if she accepted him. Norman claims he has an alibi for the time of death. Henry takes another look at Dwight's body and notices the golf club wound was treated, which suggests someone helped Dwight because a rural boy from Oklahoma wouldn't have the means to impersonate a British noble. Looking for where Dwight bought his expensive clothes, Henry spots a gold pen in a catalog and suspects it's the murder weapon. The police investigate Dwight's purchases and learn he used an employee discount from a woman named Patricia. Searching her apartment, they find many etiquette books, a blood-stained cloth, and a photo of Dwight before his transformation. They think Patricia killed Dwight because he fell genuinely in love with Emily instead of running away with Patricia and the scam money. Security cameras show Patricia training and dating Dwight. Since the investigation started, Patricia hasn't shown up at work, and her face is now on wanted posters all over the city. That afternoon, Henry and Abe go to the cemetery and see Emily at Dwight's funeral, getting too close to her father's lawyer. Henry also notices Patricia sneaking around, so they follow her while calling Joe. Patricia is eventually arrested and swears she's innocent. She confirms Dwight broke up with her and that on the night of the murder, he planned to tell Emily the truth. She reveals Dwight was killed at the exact spot where he proposed to Emily. The team reenacts the scene at the park, proving Emily didn't have the strength to kill Dwight, especially since she has an alibi. Someone must have killed Dwight to keep Emily around, so the police decide to arrest her to set a trap. In the evening, Norman's lawyer goes to the park to retrieve the gold pen he buried after the murder, hoping to prove the police don't have it. Detectives surround him and arrest him immediately. It turns out the lawyer is in love with Emily and killed Dwight to stop him from running away with her. Henry and Joe reassure Emily that Dwight truly loved her and tore up the check because he didn't want the money. Henry takes a cab home but soon realizes the driver is actually Adam, his mysterious stalker. Adam killed the real driver minutes ago and stole the cab to trick Henry. Driving wildly through the city, Adam mocks Henry for not believing he's immortal. To prove it, Adam shoots himself in the head and his body vanishes. The car loses control and falls into the river. Henry tries to open the doors and windows but fails and ends up drowning. When he comes back to life, cops see him swimming naked and arrest him. At the station, Joe demands an explanation, and Henry says he was sleepwalking. Joe tells him being eccentric is okay, but this can't continue because it will harm his credibility. Other officers tease him about the incident, but Joe shows concern, which Henry ignores. At the lab, Lucas shows Henry the latest body found, the taxi driver, who has a single sword wound. Henry tells Abe what's happening, and Abe scolds him for going after Adam alone. He urges Henry to ask Joe for help, but Henry remembers a time when he trusted another woman with his secret and she sent him to an asylum. Henry takes some swords from the antique shop to test, but none match the wound. Soon, police find the cab in the water and take it out to search for clues. A bullet casing under the seat is recognized as coming from an antique gun. Joe wants to collect DNA from scratches on the back seat, but Henry says the water probably washed it away. She also finds Henry's watch, and he pretends he just dropped it. That night, Henry and Abe go to the river to look for the gun. Just as Henry prepares to die for it, police interrupt them. Henry is taken back to the station and explains to Joanna. Henry tells the police he was just looking for clues, so they let him go. Joe checks on him and suggests he might need therapy, but also offers to listen whenever he needs. This reminds Henry of his time in a psychiatric hospital and the terrible treatments he went through there. Despite this, Henry decides to give therapy a try. After some talking, the therapist Lewis tells him he needs more people he can trust and talk to when he's in trouble, because being alone has clearly worn him down. Meanwhile, the police find the gun Henry saw the night before, an old model registered to Richard Smythe in Brooklyn. At the registered address, they find the apartment empty except for Richard's dead body, which has been cut open. Joe calls Henry, who examines the body and explains Richard was autopsied while still alive, with very precise cuts like those from a hunting knife. Suspicious, Henry rushes back to his office and finds his own hunting knife covered in blood. Henry shares this with Abe, who tells him they either have to leave the city or trust Joe with a secret. Joe learns from Lucas that Henry has been acting strange and finds out the style of Richard's autopsy matches Henry's. She goes to the antique shop and catches Henry packing to leave town, holding the blood-stained knife. Abe urges Henry to tell the truth, but Henry keeps thinking about his torture in the hospital and hesitates. Henry is taken to the police station, where he tells Joe and Joanna a changed story. He claims he has a crazy stalker who thinks he's immortal. At first, he thought the anonymous calls were pranks, but finding the body made him realize the danger was real. He planned to leave town to stop the stalker. Joe points out Henry was with his therapist at the time of the murder, and Joanna believes he's innocent. Henry and Lucas do a thorough autopsy and find a bite mark on the body. Both victims were recently vaccinated for hepatitis B. Joe checks their work history and discovers they both worked at the same psychiatric hospital. Henry and Joe visit the hospital and learn both men left after a physical altercation with a patient. The hospital won't reveal which patient without a court order, but a psychiatrist can see the files. Henry asks his therapist Lewis for help, and Lewis accesses the patient's file. The patient's name is Clark. There are no birth records for him, but he's been caught skinny dipping in the river several times. He's violent, attacked many staff, and shows no fear of death or pain. Clark is supposed to be in counseling, so Joe rushes to lock down the building. Unfortunately, Clark escapes just before the door locks. Joanna sends police with wanted posters all over the city searching for Clark. Henry comes home to loud music and finds Clark waiting for him in the basement. Clark kneels and shows a katana, asking Henry to end his life, but Henry refuses. Abe arrives just then. Clark tries to grab the sword to stop Abe, so Henry tackles him. They struggle violently, throwing each other against furniture. Henry manages to grab a knife and stabs Clark, killing him instantly. The police arrive to take the body and tell Henry he shouldn't feel guilty because it was self-defense and he took down a serial killer, a righteous kill. Suddenly, Henry's phone rings. Adam calls and says Clark was a psychopath, so Henry did a good thing. Adam reveals he manipulated Clark to believe Henry could pass on immortality by killing him, and now Henry has finally experienced something new in his long life. When Adam tells Henry to look outside, it turns out Adam is actually Lewis, the therapist, who leaves in a taxi before Henry can react. The film succeeds in creating a tense and gripping atmosphere thanks to a well-constructed plot where every detail matters. The combination of a classic police investigation with supernatural elements, especially the concept of immortality, adds a refreshing originality to a genre often crowded with cliches. The main character, Henry, is particularly well developed, with a complex past that brings emotional and psychological depth to the story. The tension gradually builds throughout the narrative, punctuated by surprising twists that keep the viewer hooked until the very last scene. This ability to blend suspense, mystery, and reflection on human nature is one of the film's major strengths. Despite its strengths, the film sometimes suffers from narrative overload, with several subplots that can confuse the viewer or make the story hard to follow. Some revelations, especially the identity of the mysterious Adam/Lewis, lack subtlety and feel predictable, which lessens the dramatic impact of these key moments. The pacing is uneven, swinging between very dynamic sequences and others where the action slows down too much, breaking the built-up tension. Additionally, several secondary characters remain underdeveloped, weakening the emotional weight of certain scenes and preventing the audience from fully investing in their fate. These flaws slightly detract from the overall experience, which would have benefited from a more concise and balanced approach.